Technically, all you need to start DMing is a cheap set of dice, something to write with, and a good understanding of the rules. And when I say a good understanding of the rules, I don't necessarily mean every single minute rule, but the basics, the when to roll a d20, what kind of call to make, and how to build your world around that, or how to just read a module if you're going to go down that route. And obviously, one of your favorite drinks helps. However, good tools can help a lot. So this video is dedicated to my favorite tools as a DM and why they have made my games so much better for me and my table. Starting with the basics, you're gonna need something as a DM screen. For me, I have commandeered my partners. I will use whatever is on hand. A proper DM screen is not something I have invested in because I'm a woodworker. I built the table you're looking at, and building a DM screen is on my list of things to do. That list is just bigger than I'd like it to be. But regardless of how your DM screen looks, be it some cardboard, foam, or even just putting together some pieces of paper with duct tape, that I definitely have not done before, having your screen to separate you from the players is one of the best tools that you can have. I think there's a big misunderstanding about DM screens, that they are there for you to hide things and keep secrets, but I always look at it as this is here for my players. It is to keep them invested in the story because they don't know what's waiting around the corner. And it might also be to skew some numbers if one of them are about to die in an oopsie poopsies. Which, not to say that death shouldn't matter in D&D, but I am one of those DMs who think that death should be important. You should never die at a level 3 because you didn't understand your spells and miscast, or as a DM, you've misbalanced and miscalculated what damage they were gonna do. This is your helper to keep your players happy and to sneak snacks, like milk. My next favorite tool is definitely TorchLite Speakers. They are easily adaptable, they all sync to each other, so if you're in a bigger space, you can plop them around to get the super cool surround sound effect, but they look like little torches, too. I usually like to keep one on each side of my DM screen, and that is how I set the mood. Music is so important to setting the mood in any campaign, even the lack thereof in certain moments. And it also doesn't always have to be D&D music. One of my all-time favorite memories at my table when it came to music was when my players were fighting a false hydra, and it was twisting some of their memories who didn't have earplugs at the table, so they didn't realize they were in a room with a false hydra. And as we would switch between players and their perspectives, I had a horror movie soundtrack and the perspective of the player who was simply in a grocery store eating marshmallows. I had a 1920s vintage, very perky, upbeat sound. It was chef kiss. And having speakers that you can simply put on your YouTube soundtrack or your app and whatever is the quickest for you, that has been a game changer for me. Make sure if you're getting any form of speakers, be it your phone behind the screen or fancy little torch lights, that you are asking your players how the volume is. I usually like to have the music playing when people are starting to come in for the night, so that way I can kind of gauge by their reaction to it if it's too loud or if it's too soft, because this screen makes a big difference. The next absolute necessity is, how are you going to run your battles? What has been a game changer for me is having a simple dry erase board so I can make maps on the fly for my dungeons or even taverns if somebody decides to throw a punch. And I got a cheap picture frame that was on sale. I took out the backing, and if you check out pretty close, I have 1-inch squares that I've put all across it. So whenever I sit down with my players and they decide to take us on a sporadic adventure, I can use some dry erase markers and super quickly scribble out wherever they are, plop this on top, and now we have a battle. Do I wish that these were more evenly aligned? Yes, I do. I probably should have gotten a bigger dry erase board. But sometimes it's about what works, not always what's perfect, and this has always worked. Another huge DM essential for me are props. It doesn't necessarily always have to be the fanciest. Sometimes it's as simple as taking your outdoor battery candle, and as a player is being visited at night, you turn off all the other lights as you pass this to them with a note, and they start panicking. Sometimes props come in the form of clues. I had made these 2 identical looking letters. My player received one of them originally, and on the way to a city, I switched them out. I tried to make the handwriting look as similar as possible, the page rip as similar as possible, so at face value, he'd glance at it, realize it was the same, and not really think about it. This in and of itself was a clue that it's not a false hydra on its own. False hydras are known to change the way that your brain works and how you remember things using their sound. But they don't change physical stuff. And that in and of itself was why that clue was important, because it showed that there was somebody working with the false hydra. Why? Who knows? My players who are definitely watching this did not chase that clue. Good luck. But clues aside, you can also make more in-depth props. Now, this was a gift I had made for my partner, but it is a custom mimic box. And most people would think that you would spend a lot of money on this, but this was literally air dry clay, paint, and the eye is craft foam and a soda bottle that I cut the edge off of to give it the physical bubbled effect of an eye. And slowly carved away with a cheap $20 Dremel at the box to make all the patterns, and stained it using coffee. Now, it's not really a prop, but one of the favorite things I have as a D&D is stickers. I found that a lot of my players would forget that they have inspiration, not use their inspiration, or stack their inspiration. And this is strictly for DM inspiration. So I got these cute little stickers. The rules of the stickers are as follows. If you get DM inspiration and you hold on to the sticker, if you want to use the sticker on something, you have to use your inspiration or you lose it. If you lose the sticker, you lose your inspiration. To encourage people not just wait forever. And I think it helps a lot with the almost remembrance of that moment. I think that a lot of people forget their greatest moments at times. I can only remember one of the 3 times that I got DM inspiration, and it was because it was a really stupid joke about a Volkswagen. Don't worry about it. But having a physical reminder is awesome. I had a player who had one of the tumbler mugs, and they would put their little D&D stickers on it. And that would give them a little pick-me-up during the day to remember all these different adventures. They had the little adventure cup. So giving your players a little something to hold on to encourage them to use their DM inspiration, has helped a lot. I also find being helpful to your players is helpful to you. So I like to carry enough dice to make sure that I have a dice set for every player. On a regular, I always carry a single dice set on me because, again, as long as I got a sticky notepad and some dice, I can run a campaign. But if I know I'm going to a pre-made table, I like to keep my whole bag on me. It is so common that I see players, be it veterans or people who are new, forget their dice. Especially new players who might not even own dice. So having that resource available is awesome. You could rely on other players to share their dice or to have enough dice sets, but I find it's a lot easier to have that available. Maybe it's a pain in the ass to have to get them or carry them around, but it shows the players that you care about them, and right off the bat, it establishes a good trusting relationship. Which brings me to notebooks. I try to, when I sit at a new table with players I don't know, so I don't know if they're gonna be bringing anything, get some notebooks for them. Each of these notebooks were 87 cents at the dollar store. 87 cents. So if I have a full table of 5 to 6, awesome. $6, and I know that my players are going to have a notebook. It also establishes, without saying it outright, that you may want to record some of these things for future use. I even have a couple of these that are for myself to keep notes, and that's mainly because I lose them a lot. But in reality, most of my DMing, I just have whatever paper I can grab at behind the screen. So yeah, get your players stuff. Also, if you're dealing with new players at your table, I do suggest you get yourself an RPG Campfire deck. The RPG Campfire deck is technically topics of conversation for around the fire, which can help new players a lot, but I also find that some veteran players who are quieter might need some help having prompts, especially if they've been on a hiatus for a while. I find it's even more helpful though if you have character creation sessions or session zeros as an icebreaker. Sometimes fleshing out your character isn't always, well, what weapon do they have and where did they live, but all the whys that make them who they are. You don't need a fancy purchase card deck either. You can think of creative questions, Google, find a generator for topics of conversation, and have them written down and make your own DIY icebreaker deck. The whole point of this tool is to have something that helps your players and you get to know their characters. Now, one thing a lot of DMs use that I don't really use but is still helpful are tokens and minis. Tokens can be class-wise, there are rings, they help with showing who's under what condition. I like to make the note onto my own paper behind the screen, but some people like to physically see it on the board. And minis are a good way to keep track of your characters. I think your player characters definitely should have minis, and I always carry a few so that they can stand out in the crowd. I also have this super cool Electroform mini, which is my absolute favorite. But aside from these, I don't usually use minis as a DM. The reason why is I prefer to use my dice. Whenever I'm planning out a combat, I always put enemies in increments of dice amounts. Sometimes a big bad will get a candle on the board or something of that nature, and I would love to get more into getting minis for the big bads. But one of the most clunky parts of combat to me was when I was sitting at a table and I was like, okay, but which guy's which again? Can I attack that one? No, that, the one, what is that mini wearing? Is that, what is that? And trying to even figure out who you're fighting or keeping track of it was something I really did not enjoy about combat. So when I set up my battlefield for each of the enemies, I take a dice and I put a different number upwards on each one. It not only helps me behind the screen to keep track of enemy 1, I'll write what they are, but the quick health bars to keep track of and how my players can know who they're attacking or answering questions, it is so much easier just being able to say enemy 1 and there's a 1, enemy 3 and there's a 3. And I just use a bunch of D6s or a bunch of D4s across the board. So instead of buying minis, I just buy dice I like. Keeping things organized behind the screen though is huge. I wish I could show off some super cool organized notebook. I haven't gotten that good yet, but please use a rolling tray. Players and DMs, please use a rolling tray. I literally have a table that I built for my friend that has a built-in centerpiece so you can't lose dice. But there is nothing more sometimes funny but infuriating than having to chase dice around the house, especially when you have animals. And just get you a tray. I also have players at my table who are neurodivergent like me, so keeping them fully engaged, I use combat puzzles. For some, that is water that gets electrified on occasion, well, the cave is flooding. For others, it's having the battlefield put together in quadrants with huge stone beasts that crush certain quadrants at certain times and having the enemies shift between that. I use a spin down die to organize what turns those different things are going to happen on. So for example, with the flooding cave. Every time somebody takes a turn, I spin the dice. And every 5 turns, it would flood more. But every 2 turns, it would be electrified. So people would know at the end of their turn whether or not they needed to move to higher ground. For longer combats, or when players are very quick, I would turn the spin down die per round and keep track of things that way. Sometimes, what I love to do is if I am in a bind as to how to make combat really interesting, I will tell my players something really bad is going to happen when we get to 5. Put this in front of them and spin it down on each turn. I don't know at that point what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen on 5, but my players don't want to know. And it raises the stakes a bit more. And if they get to 5 and I still don't have an idea, then, you know, I'll blurt something out. I'll kill someone. No, I won't. I'll do it. No, I won't. Regardless, spin down dies change combat for me. And at some point, I will have a whole video on that. But for now, get yourself a spin down die. And think of creative ways to incorporate that into some of your tabletop. Lastly, I find a lot of DMs forget that they need their players. When I first started playing, I thought that the hardest part about getting into D&D was finding a good DM. So I became a DM. And boy oh boy, was I wrong on the most difficult part. I have had players sneaking hard drugs at my table and doing all kinds of wild shit. I've had players who were so afraid of doing anything, they stonewalled the entire group from even taking quests that weren't 110% safe, like cutting some old man's ivy off of his building. I have had players who decided to use a group as their personal therapy session, including bringing a bunch of people into drama that no one wanted to be in our group chats. I have had players who cross-talked the entire time to such a point that we could not play the game. And most of these weren't even new players. So please, DM to DM or DM to potential DM. Thank your players. Every time I sit down at my table, I thank everybody for coming back together again. And at the end of the night, I also thank everybody for coming back together again. If you are not doing this for your players, go write a novel, go make a video game, go write a screenplay. But we are here for our table, and that includes the essential of our players. So make sure to remember to thank them. And thank yourself for watching this video. Doing research and trying to improve means you are already on the way to being a good DM if you aren't already. That being said, please tell me what your favorite tool is, be a DM or player, and I'm gonna pick one to steal in my next game and see how that works at my table. So if you wanna see how that works out, don't forget to like and subscribe so that hopefully I see you in another video. Bye guys!